Thank you, Elder Weatherly, for your fine and courageous attempt in affirming this proposition. I think you've done an admirable job recognizing that that was your last speech in your affirmative. Look forward to tomorrow night when we will just simply continue this on. But when I will be in the affirmative, and the bad thing about this is that really I can speak for myself. I have an opponent, a major opponent, and I'm sure it's his major opponent tonight, and that's the time clock. And because neither one of us get to everything that we want to get to. I want my friend's chart. I think it's 199. I'm not certain, but it's on Tertullian. He mentioned Tertullian, and I haven't. Let me have my chart, please. 40. My chart 40, and I think it on the veiling of women in church history. He does mention Tertullian. If this is not the actual chart, it's this one or the one after it or before it. And he mentioned that Tertullian is there. Tertullian had to write a work about veiling of the virgins. The veil is an obligatory adornment only for the dedicated virgins. I would take issue with that, but we can talk about that maybe tomorrow night. Tertullian did write about the veiling of virgins, and he was upset because the virgins weren't veiled. Veiling was a thing in most Christian societies that young girls that go through puberty, then they would put on the veil to give witness that they were going into womanhood. And this is what Tertullian said. Quote, "Every woman, saith he, praying and prophesying with head uncovered, dishonoreth her head," quoting Paul. Now, you see, and he talked about these people being Trinitarian. No, they weren't. Tertullian was economical Trinity that's so close to oneness you'd trip over it if you're trying to define the differences. But, really that doesn't matter. The Godhead isn't our discussion tonight. The discussion is head covering and what historical Christianity saw as Paul's required covering. And historical Christianity of all flavors, Trinitarian, modalistic monarchians, Arians, all of them followed the RAC tradition because that's what they understood Paul to teach. And I've challenged him to produce anyone from church history that would support his view. He has not. He made an attempt, and we're going to get to his attempt in just a minute. But Tertullian has this to say. He says, Paul said, praying and prophesying with head uncovered dishonoreth her head. He said, what is every woman? But woman of every age, of every rank, of every condition. By saying every, he accepts not of womanhood, just as he accepts not of manhood, either from not being covered, or just so he says every man. So then in the masculine sex, under the name of man, even the youth is to be not veiled. So too in the feminine under the name woman, even the virgin is bidden to be veiled. So his argument is that girls of all ages, the young girls all the way up should be veiled, not only the women that are married or the women that have gone through their change into womanhood. All right. Let me have his chart. I think it's 203. Let's look at that for just a moment. Chart 203, the Council of Gangra. Now, I asked him to produce one historical support where his position of long uncut hair was held by any Christian in history, and he produced this. Gangra, Canon 17. If a woman from pretended asceticism cuts off her hair, given her by God to remind her of her submission, thus renouncing the command of subjection, let her be anathema. Now, what he does not give us is the context of that statement from Gangra, the council at Gangra. Now, may I have my chart 51, please? And in my chart 51, I deal somewhat with this. And I'm not a church historian, but I know a little bit. I want to read you a little bit about the background of this Canon 17. And it'll take a minute, so bear with me. I'm just reading it for the sake of getting it in the record. Because, hey, this thing's going to be published in a book form, just like the good old Campbellites. Amen. And this is what the letter from the synod at Gangra sent this letter out to all the bishops, and it said, "Forasmuch as a most holy synod of bishops assembled on account of certain necessary matters of ecclesiastical business in the church at Gangra, on inquiring also into the matters which concern Eustathius, found that many things had been unlawfully done by these very men who are partisans of Eustathius. It was compelled to make definitions, which has hastened to make known to all for the removal of whatever has by him been done amiss." In other words, they're getting ready to excommunicate this guy and his followers. "For from their utter abhorrence of marriage," hey, I love marriage. "From his ultimate abhorrence of marriage has any, and from their adoption of the proposition that no one living in a state of marriage has any hope towards God, many misguided married women have forsaken their husbands, fomented separation from the houses of God and of the church, treating the church and its members with disdain, and establishing separate meetings and assemblies, and different doctrines and other things in opposition to the churches, and those things which are done in the church, wearing strange apparel, to the destruction of the common custom of dress, women too disregarding decent custom, and instead of womanly apparel wearing man's clothes, thinking to be justified because of these, while many of them under a pretense of piety cut off the growth of hair, which is natural to woman. Therefore, the Holy Synod present in Gangria was compelled on these accounts to condemn them." Now, this is the context of Canon 17. And Canon 17 says this: "If any woman from pretended asceticism shall cut off her hair, which God gave her as a reminder of her subjection, thus annulling, as it were, the ordinance of subjection, let her be anathema." Now, these women were just doing everything they could to not look womanly, and cutting off their hair, which is a reminder of their role of subjection to their husbands. Now, they were anathematized. But nowhere, mark it well, nowhere is it suggested in this canon of the Council of Gangra that hair was the Apostle Paul's required covering from 1 Corinthians 11, 3 through 16, but that the long hair was God's covering provided by nature, and we're going to get that tomorrow night, which is what Paul said. It's what Paul said. He said, "Does not nature itself teach you that if a woman have long hair, it is a glory to her?" And he used an argument from nature to support the RAC. And he says, so there's nothing about this Canon 17 of Gangra that contradicts Paul, nor does it contradict Chrysostom, which says because you have a natural covering of hair, that gives you a hint that you should enact your own will and your own volition in covering your head. Take your lead from nature. Take your lead from what God has instilled in nature. So Gangra doesn't contradict Paul. It doesn't contradict Chrysostom. And it does not contradict what I am saying. Let me have his next chart, please. I think it was 204, where he talks about Epiphanius. Is that Epiphanius? Is at least 5 different contexts quoted. A man ought not to wear long hair for as much as he is the glory and image of God. Now, Elder Weatherly, are you suggesting by this that Epiphanius agrees with you? That a woman's long hair, uncut hair, is her covering? Are you suggesting he agrees with you? If you're not suggesting he agrees with you, then why put this up here? Well, let me tell you what Epiphanius really believed about the woman's covering. Now, he talked about the men's covering. We're talking about women's covering. I know they're related. They really are. Now, I jab him a little bit, but we're still friends. Don't y'all get excited. This is just what we do. I could say nod your head or bat your eye, bat your head or nod your eye. But no. Okay. Here's what Epiphanius did say. Chart 53, please. Epiphanius, even though he substitutes the phrase long hair, and that's running a little bit off. I don't know why that's doing that. But when Epiphanius substitutes the phrase long hair for covering in 1 Corinthians 11 passage that deals with men, as he has cited up here, he substitutes the word veil for authority when he quotes Corinthians 11 and 10. When he quotes Corinthians 11 and 10, for a woman is to have power on her head, it says in the King Jimmy. The Greek word, it's exousion, is authority. A woman is to have authority on her head because of the angels. When Epiphanius quotes that, Epiphanius says the woman ought to have a veil on her head because of the angels. So Epiphanius does not agree with my friend. And him putting this up, here's what we call a red herring. A red herring is, the old hunters would use herring fish to train their dogs not to chase deer when they're supposed to be chasing coon. And it misguides them. It misdirects them from the trail they want to be. He wants to misdirect us a little bit here. Epiphanius doesn't support his view. Epiphanius supports Paul's view, supports Chrysostom's view, supports my view that I have been talking about here today. All right. Now then, I got to hurry on. How much time do I have, Pastor? Okay. Middle voice. He talked about the middle voice, and he talked about the middle permissive. And if I believe, and I'm not going to play the tape back on him or anything like that, but I believe he said covering is in a middle permissive voice. No, it's not. And if I could, within this next period of time, get these few charts in here. Chart 17, and I'm going to be going to 18, 19, and 20 in very quick succession. Chart 17, 18, 19. I regret that, I truly do regret that we have to do so much Greek dancing here. The English is good enough for me. If the woman be not covered, let her also be shorn. Do you think he's saying if a woman has her hair cut, let her also have her hair cut? I mean, that really takes the cake here. But number 17, epikaleo is in the middle voice. It means to cover oneself. And I don't really see the issue where he's talking about direct middle or permissive middle or causative middle. It still means in this particular case, it means the impermissive middle. It would mean the woman permits herself to be covered. But at any rate, it is, I disagree with that, and I challenge that, I deny that. Epikaleo, to be covered, is not covered, is in the direct middle. It's in the direct middle. And it means if a woman covers herself, it's a middle voice. If she does the action to herself. When she prays or prophesies, notice, when she prays or prophesies, that militates against it being hair that is a permanent covering. Let me have chart 18, please, of mine. Amen. And the Greek middle voice. We've told you the difference in the active voice and passive voice in English and the middle voice in Greek. Now let me have my chart, please, number 19. I want to read you what my friend scholar and also mine, A.T. Robertson, he's probably my go-to Greek scholar, and this is what he had to say about the middle voice. Now, my friend wants to make a big deal over the permissive middle, but A.T. Robertson says on page 608 of his large Greek grammar, he says, I'm quoting, "It is necessary to discuss the various uses of the middle, but the divisions made by the grammarians are more or less arbitrary and unsatisfactory. They are followed here merely for convenience." Then he says, still quoting, "Nearly every grammarian has his own division of these uses in the middle, none of which the Greeks themselves had." So when I introduce the middle voice and then he goes talking about the different kinds of middle voices, our go-to Greek scholar says the Greeks didn't have these different divisions. And he goes on to say, Gildersleeve is justly impatient with this over-redefinement that observes that one must needs fall back on the way of the Greek language, which is capricious in this matter. Next chart, please, number 20. Let's talk about the causative and the permissive middle. 1 Corinthians 11:6 is the one that we're really talking about. "For if a woman be not covered, let her also be shorn." And so if a woman be not covered is in the middle voice. And in 1 Corinthians chapter 11 and verse 16, shorn and also sheared are found by the modern Greek scholars. These divisions the Greeks of the New Testament period did not have, according to Robertson. But the modern Greek scholars say that in verse 6 there is a permissive middle voice where it says that she is to permit herself to have these things done. Permit herself to be shorn. Permit herself to be shaven if she's not going to wear the covering. Now, in the middle voice, if it's permissive, A.T. Robertson, page 808 and page 809, says to us, he identifies the words in this verse 6, that are permissive middle, and it's shorn and it's shaven, but it's not covered. It's not epikaleo. Epikaleo is a direct middle. The woman does it to herself. If I remember right, he said covered was permissive middle. Maybe he misspoke. Maybe he did. Now, next chart, please, number 21. In 21, we deal with the causative and the permissive middle, and I lift out A.T. Robertson's quote. And the important thing to notice is, and you can't see it from there, but someday maybe you'll see these charts up close. He gives 10, count them, 10 instances of the permissive or the causative middle in the New Testament. It's very, very rare. According to A.T. Robertson, it happens only 10 times. And he does go to 1 Corinthians chapter 11 and verse 6. And the permissive middles that he finds in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, 6 is shear and shave, but not covered. Not covered. It's not one of the 10. Amen and amen. Let me have my chart number 15, please. Number 15. We're talking about 1 Corinthians 11 and 6. Let's exegete this verse just a minute. "If a woman be not covered, let her also be shorn. But if it be a shame for a woman to be shorn or shaven, then let her be covered. Let her be covered. Epikaletesto." A.T. Robertson, word pictures of the Greek New Testament. Let her be veiled. That's what the Greek scholars recognize it to be. Let her be veiled. Present, middle, imperative of O compound word kata kalypto. Here only in the New Testament. Let her cover up herself with a veil. Still quoting A.T. Robertson. Kata, a veil hanging down. Now, next chart, number 16. Let us look at this chart. And folks, the grammar don't lie. It's present tense, it's middle voice, and it's imperative mood. Let her be covered. If it's wrong for her to be shorn or shaven, let her be covered. Present tense means present and continuing. The Greek, let her be being veiled. Get that? Let her be being veiled. It's present tense. You do it now and continue to do it. Middle voice. God bless you. I want to thank you so much for your kind attention. And maybe we'll pick up here tomorrow. Same time, same station.